Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcast. You're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's AMPIRE. Always much appreciated when you tune in. And don't forget, you can always read my work on ESPN.com. I have a story up. It's probably about a week and a half ago, but I've been on vacation, still on vacation. Anyways, the story was a couple weeks ago about all this talk about the first round pick this year, Jaden Daniels, understandably so. But there are three former previous first round picks that this franchise needs to come through. And that's Jamin Davis, Jahan Dotson, Emmanuel Forbes. So kind of went into a little bit on each of those guys, just what coaches thought about their springs, where they're at with everything and how it looks. So anyways, give that a read. It's up there. And also contributed to a group effort on the nutritional, remember that NFLPA survey where the cafeteria got a low grade? Talked to some players here about that, where it's been better, what they like, what they don't like, etc. I will say Chef Connor, shout out Chef Connor, is a very good cook. It was not about the quality of the food. So anyways, but that's part of a group effort because there were a few teams in that lower category that a few of us reporters contributed to. Anyway, that's also up on ESPN.com. Today, I'm joined by the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein, as we talk about a lot of things because it's the summer and there's not a whole lot that you can rehash. Now, we did cover some old ground, just looking at the roster. There have been a lot of kind of analytics, kind of rating the rosters and where this team is a bottom end of the roster, the perception of it. Is it accurate? And what are things that maybe can boost this roster and all that? And so we talk about that, but we also talk about barbecuing and some of the things that I've made and that Bram has made recently. And, hopefully you enjoy. And listen, if I had a scratch and sniff with my hair, you'd probably smell the smoke from the ribs that I smoked last night. We talk about that. We talk about, like, Bram, for one of the things I've been doing for the club members is going down a little bit of trip down memory lane, talking about the coaches that I've covered, what I've learned from them, what I learned about them, just some memories of them. And the Spurrier one is always entertaining because he was such a unique guy to cover. But anyway, so Bram obviously covered some of those coaches. So I asked him about covering Joe Gibbs. He grew up in the area. He was a big Redskins fan. So I wondered what it was like for him to cover Gibbs and what he learned about him, et cetera. So we talk about that and a lot of things. So good stuff. Anyway, here's my conversation with the voice of the Commanders, Bram Weinstein. All right, Bram, I'm technically still on vacation, but I did shave today because I had people wondering if I was trying to grow a beard. And the answer is no, because it would take forever and it probably wouldn't look very good, or beard or mustache or whatever. But anyways, I'm still technically on vacation. But before we get into other topics, we just wrapped up the 4th of July, I'd say it's barbecue season, but for me, that's all year. But I am curious, like, did you grill anything? Did you smoke anything recently on the 4th, whatever?
I did Father's Day. We had everybody over and I did a smoked pastrami.
Oh, that's right.
I think I've started to figure that out a little bit. So that's probably maybe the best thing I make these days. And then we smoked whole chickens. That worked out really well too. But lately, no, because 4th of July, we ended up running down to Kent Island and had crabs. We did a full-on Maryland 4th of July, had crabs and watched fireworks.
So the smoked pastrami, that's something I haven't done yet and want to do because there's such a long process to it. How long?
Yeah, it brines for a week.
Right. And then what else? Like, what else are you doing to it? And
so it brines like corned beef for a week,
right,
like in a mixture of salt, vinegar, a million spices. And you flip it every day, so that it kind of remains brined. And then it's really simple once you take it out. You have to dry it. It has to basically stay in the refrigerator uncovered out of the brine for a day. So there's like an 8th day where it has to be like that. And then you basically cover it in a mixture of pepper and coriander. So really the main difference between like a corned beef or a pastrami is just the spices on top.
right.
So, and what I learned the first couple of times was I put too much pepper on it. So it became like too much pepper. That'd be the best way to put it. But the last time, I think I've got the mix right now. So it's pepper and coriander, and then you smoke it for like a brisket. It was on the smoker for 8 hours. So it was
How many
great.
pounds? Because like with brisket, as you know, like do you still get the stall? Do you still get all that with the pastrami?
Yeah. It was like, I think it was 6 pounds, 7 pounds, and it was
All
on
right,
there
that's
for
not
eight
bad.
hours. Yeah, but it was great. Really great.
You know, it's funny because like, well, for the fourth, I smoked some ribs, and because I haven't done those in a little bit, and you know, I mean, that's a basic thing to smoke, right? But like I did soak it in beer for a few hours before putting it on the smoker. Um, and then I did you know, I have a rub and you're spritzing throughout, and I do the 3-2-1 method, which, you know, after 3 hours, you take it out and you wrap it, but it's the bed of like brown sugar, butter, barbecue sauce, a
Mhm.
little bit of honey. But then I also at the end added this a tangy, like a peach glaze, which was terrific. And it was like chili sauce, and then like this hot sauce to throw in there too, and ground mustard, garlic, onion powder, etc. And then I smoked some peaches, some sliced peaches, and kind of garnished it with that just to give it another little flavor of taste. And it was like, and I think my son told me it was like, that may have been the best I've made. So I
Huh?
was but the peach glaze was terrific. And the other thing, Bram, too, is Bram and I took this brisket class at Dizzy Pig a year and a
Yeah.
half ago or so. But while we were there, I remember talking to some of the other people about like cooking the chicken. And, you know, sometimes I'll still do a whole chicken on there, but also now I've done more of the spatchcock method where you're just cutting it,
Mhm.
taking out the cavity and doing that. So, and that was all from like people down there talking about it. So I'm like, well, I got to try this. So, and it works pretty well. But I think either way, it's pretty damn good. So anyway, but I don't
Yeah.
know if I'm going to have a chance to do a lot more smoking before the season starts, but we'll see. Hopefully.
Yeah. You can't, and plus you can't grow the beard this time. I mean, like, it is funny, like in hockey, everybody grows the beard because it's the grind of the postseason. For us, the grind of the season is the preseason. Like
Right.
it's I think it's the only sport where the longest part of it is the very, very beginning, and then
Right.
it all gets very structured after that. But I'm not growing a beard for 100-degree days in Ashburn. That's for sure.
No, no. And like I said, for me, it would take way too long because it takes a few days before people realize like, oh, are you trying to do something? Like, no, I just don't feel like shaving. And when you're on vacation, there was one off season where I went almost 2.5 months without shaving because we didn't have to go anywhere. And like, well,
Yeah.
I don't have to, and there was no Zoom at that time. So I'm like, well, I don't have to go anywhere, but I can't say that I looked great. So this is the mug that we're going to all have to live with. And I do like to go a few days without it because I just get
Yeah.
tired of shaving. So, and it's the beauty of our job where I don't have to. And we're around guys who are who are coming off a field sweaty and pads and all that. If I haven't shaved in a couple of days, nobody's going to notice. So anyway,
Yeah, we'll start the I've gotten so used to the cycle now. Everybody's typically in a really good mood for about 2 weeks. Like
yeah,
the first week, everybody's in a really good mood. Like everybody's happy to see each other and they don't mind doing the interviews, and everybody's like, it's world's their oyster. And this year specifically, there's a lot of good energy and everything's new. By week two, it's hot. They want to play. They're already sick of us. Like that, like that's how kind of the cycle works.
yeah. And it'll be interesting this year too, because even in camp, there are gonna be a lot of guys because there's so many new faces, coaches, players, etc., that some of the holdovers may actually welcome all this change just because it may limit how much we need to talk to them.
Yeah, yeah,
Now I will say, like I was thinking of McLaurin, but he's going to get asked a lot of questions anyways because it's Terry McLaurin. But there are going to be some others where it's like, oh yeah, okay, you want to talk to Bobby Wagner, you want to talk to this guy, this guy, this guy. So it's going
yeah.
to be a little bit different. But one of the things, Bram, that I've been doing for the club members this summer is just talking about some of the coaches that I've covered and just some memories of them or what you learned from them or learned about them, etc. But and I haven't when I'm recording this, I haven't done Gibbs yet, but I'm going to, obviously. You grew up obviously a big Redskins fan and then had the chance to cover him.
Mhm.
What was that like for you in that situation?
I mean, that was the only one where I was covering somebody, at least initially, where there was a lot of, like I would just describe it more as like I defer to him just in general. Like everyone knows who he is. And, from my perspective, having, grown up as a kid in this area, going to games at RFK and them being one of the 3 or 4 best teams in the NFL, if not the best team for a decade, he kind of like, I don't know, you get used to when you cover people like to ask critical questions. And in his case, it was like, I think in the beginning, hard to do that because he is who he is. He also was such a genuinely nice person, and also very giving with his time, with the exception of on Fridays when he turned into Friday Joe. It was like we got used to he the game face came on. Like he was extremely generous with his time Monday through Thursday. And then Friday would come along and it's like a different, like a light bulb went off and it's like it was like he was ready to go in the ring. And but you get to, you learn everybody's personalities are different, but like he became very short, didn't really have any time for you anymore, and was just ready to go. So you could see the competitive nature. I think that was the most interesting part about him was like he was very generous and very open and very into getting to know everybody. Like that was an obvious trait of his. But when it was time to go to work, he took it as seriously as anybody I've ever seen. You saw the competitive fire literally come out of him and how much it meant to him. And I got a sense in those, 3, 4 years that he was here, like you could see why it burned him out the first time. Like it meant so much. His emotions went to such a place. He got so wound up in it that the results ate at him. Like it was just so obvious that that's who he was. And it's probably why he was so successful. He knew how to handle personalities. He obviously knew how to delegate authority. He obviously knew how to motivate. And it was obvious too that when Sundays rolled around, it was dead serious to him. And I think that's why these guys played for him the way they did the 2 times that they played for him.
Was there something that you learned? Because you're coming in there with a preconceived notion of who he is.
Yeah.
So was there something that you learned that either surprised you or, what was, was there something that, I don't know, was there something that maybe that was different about him that you didn't expect?
I think from my perspective, as like, listen, I still want them to win. And now that I'm the voice of the team, I like really want them to win. And I'm still at heart like a huge fan. But in that role at that time, the curtain goes up and you get to know the organization differently. And the fandom kind of strips away a little bit and you get to know the people a little bit. And I think you try to look at them as much. And in my case, it's not going to be easy because I was a fan of the team, but you try to do it as much in an unbiased fashion as possible and try to look at and try not to spin it, positive no matter what. And, but in the case with him, because of what he had accomplished in the past, it was very, very hard to be overly critical of anything he would do, even amid like the first year when he hired a lot of his old coaches, and old is an operative word here. I mean, these guys had been around a long time. We were joking. I think we used to call them the Space Cowboys because they'd like been around forever. And it was so clear the first year that like they needed to catch up to where the NFL was, that they were playing a game that was a little yesteryear. And to his credit, to Gibbs' credit, like they did. They went and hired people like Al Saunders, and they like picked up the pace of getting into a modern NFL. So that was another trait of his that I think we learned. He wasn't set in his ways. He was willing to adjust. I think the smartest thing he did from the get-go was bring Greg Williams in, because they had a modern defensive coordinator at the time. But outside of that, I think you saw that he needed and understood that he needed to evolve, as a coach, and that the things he was doing and the schemes that he was doing weren't working at the time. So that was maybe, someone who is a Hall of Famer who's might as well be a deity in this area, would go on Mount Rushmore in this area, comes back, puts his reputation on the line. I'd say probably the most surprising thing I learned about him was a total willingness to evolve and not pretend like he had all the answers, which I think, for some people with the egos in this type of business, to actually basically admit that, I think was probably the most surprising thing about him that I found. And obviously was another really great trait about him.
it's funny because I've been around a couple of coaches who definitely felt like they had all the answers.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's, the other thing I remember too, and again, I've talked about some of this, but again, we've covered a lot of coaches. And I just remember coming out of the Zorn presser and you and I walking back to the press room and you saying, this is going to be a disaster.
I know. I hate talking about it because it was like I saw the future in that moment. I was going to be surprised. I mean, just all of the things that happened leading up to him becoming the head coach did not read like it was going to go very well because you don't typically do things like that. He wasn't hired initially to be the head coach of the team and didn't have the experience of doing it, and then they just handed it to him. I don't because they couldn't find the other person they wanted or the people they ran up the flagpole, the fan base reacted to. I don't like so many reasons. But I remember that press conference and I went, he doesn't know our organization. And I just don't think this is going to go very well. If you just go off communication, which I do a lot, this is not going to go well, really.
It's funny because like that's how I've always taken those first press conferences. You get a feel for who that person is as a coach. And like, with Schottenheimer, very prepared, knew about the roster. Gibbs, you could feel the aura and just feel the passion that he has for it, the intensity. With Spurrier, you knew he had no clue about this roster,
but
about the NFL.
I think in Spurrier's case, I think all of us were willing to listen. The guy was so successful.
He was
so successful that like, even though it was, folksy and not, what you typically hear, I was willing to give that a chance. I didn't walk out of that one going, we're in trouble here. I went, okay, that's just who he is. And he always seems to figure out how to be really, really good and score a ton of points. And that one became evident pretty early that it wasn't going to go that way, that schematically everyone was right. This isn't going to work in the NFL. And then he didn't evolve, didn't really care to try to evolve, didn't really know the team very well. And that second year was a death march. Like it was, so obvious he was either unwilling or incapable of changing in a way to be successful on the NFL level. And in months, actually, I interviewed him and he said something to me about that he was under the impression Bobby Beathard was going to be the general manager of the team. Mm-hmm. And he wasn't. And so he kind of uses that as somewhat of an excuse for what happened. But I think it's a combination of things with him. Like the scheme was not going to work, was getting quarterbacks killed, and there was no, evolution of it. And then I always thought it was really funny. Like he literally didn't know the names of the players on the defense. Like just didn't even know them.
Darnarian McCants was a tough one for him too. D'Artagnan. I mean, it was, but and it's funny because with his press conference, I didn't come out of there. I was coming out of there thinking, well, it's worked for him. So it must be his is more of in hindsight. Well, there was the first clue, but it was in hindsight with the other ones, you just could feel it. And that's why even with Quinn, you can kind of feel a passion that he has for this. And a direction.
I liked everything I heard from him. I really liked what I heard from Joe Witt too. Like Quinn's was interesting. He's got a lot of experience. He's been to the Super Bowl. He wasn't the fans' first choice. You know what I mean? Like I think they got primed to get this guy out of Detroit. And so, this one, considering that everything Adam Peters, and it wasn't very much at that point, but everything that he was kind of going to do kind of was already accepted, like the aura of Adam Peters, like had already taken hold and everyone had just kind of bought into that this is going to work and hopefully it will. When they hired Dan Quinn, what was interesting about it was there was a portion of the fan base, you could feel there was a thud to it or that there was a miss or they were left at the altar or something like that. And then after the press conference, I think that was all alleviated pretty quickly. If you heard him talk, what is motivating him? He's just, to me, he really is like one, obviously he knows what he's doing. There isn't some question about whether he can do this, but him talking about, here are the mistakes I made in the past. And here's the one, this is what I don't want to replicate again. That resonated really hard with me. His motivation to prove himself, prove his ability, that resonated really hard with me. He wasn't sure he'd get a second chance. This organization's asking for a second chance from a lot of the fan base, really, with the new ownership, the new, front office, now the new coaching staff. That resonated with me too, that they're saying almost collectively, he's like, hey, like, I want a second chance. I want to do it for you. We all need a second chance to try to rebuild the trust and rebuild, something you're proud of. So I'm hoping he's right place at the right time. Like I don't feel like they're taking a chance on him. Like his track record is proven here. He's been with a lot of different teams. He's been a very, very good coordinator. He did get to the Super Bowl as a head coach. It did crash after that. He's the first to tell you I looked in the mirror and said, if I get this chance again, I'm going to fix the mistakes I made. He wants to stay in his lane. He doesn't want all the power of the organization. I think that that's important here. So I'm excited about him. But again, until they do it, we don't know. Until they do it, we don't know. And that's why, like, this is all very exciting, but they haven't played a game yet. Same thing I say about Jaden Daniels to everybody. I'm like, he looks great. He really does. He looks great in shorts and a t-shirt. I haven't even seen him run a full practice yet. So I can't give you a full opinion about him until he plays, until he's put to the test, until it's 3rd and 7 in a tie game in the 4th quarter. What does he do? Like, I don't know. So we'll all find out together.
And I think the one thing too with Quinn that stood out in that, I think it's also when you talk to people about him is the sincerity with which he approached it too. It wasn't just saying, I'm going to do this different and do that different. It was, he attacked it differently between Atlanta and now stopping in Dallas, obviously, but just the approach he took to get from point A to point B. Whereas I think with, when Ron took over and he talked about talking to Andy Reid and this and that about second chance, I don't think he really examined it. I don't think he examined it the way that Dan Quinn did. And I think we
also
saw
didn't
that.
have to. He was hired almost immediately after he was fired.
And I think one thing that Quinn was, I think he kind of wanted to take that little break from it. Maybe if you get offered right away, you take it because, hey, someone's giving me the chance to do it again. But I think it helped him taking that time away from being a head coach to do it.
Yeah. I mean, what you're asked to do matters here too. And in Ron's case, they empowered him to do literally everything to turn the whole organization around from the football side, top to bottom, as the GM, whatever, president,
Too much.
GM, football coach. So like he had just been fired. There was no retrospective part of it. He was wooed to come here. He was given all of the power at one time. In fairness to him, I mean, he's being placed as you have to have the answer to literally everything.
Right.
And that's how they were empowered to do it. That's not what Quinn is doing when he's walking in here. He's had time to reflect. He's not being asked to put the roster together. He's just being asked, what type of players, what type of traits are you looking for? We're going to help you find that. So it's a completely different scenario. There's a teamwork scenario that's put in place here. So like in fairness to Ron, there was no teamwork. He may have asked for that and demanded that and brought it on himself. And maybe he regrets it now to some degree for doing it. And I think he kind of admitted that by the end that maybe there was just too much on his plate, especially when you put also the fact that off the field, he was going to have to deal with a lot of things that really had nothing to do with him, but it was just going to be more things he had to deal with. In hindsight, maybe he would have done things a little differently, but in fairness to him, they told him be the answer to literally everything. So he had to act the part, didn't he? Right.
Yeah. And but I do think it benefits Quinn being in this spot in that, but now, so like looking at the roster, one of the things that in this offseason, a lot of places are going, say, kind of gauging the roster and where they're at with everything. And I was listening to Dan Jeremiah and Bucky Brooks's podcast, kind of going over positions and all that. And most positions they're going to have, and I haven't listened to all of it, but I know, a lot of them, they're going to have Washington 4th in the division where it's like defensive line, maybe secondary, things like that. And I think it was on ESPN, one of the analytics had the roster as like one of the, I think, bottom 3 or 4 in the NFL. And I think it's hard to really, obviously it's hard to know because this is just going into the season. And I think it's hard to know with the impact of a change, what that's going to make on this roster. But how do you view this roster going at this point where, a few weeks from starting training camp? How do you view the roster? Do you think those are fair assessments at this point?
I don't know what their roster is. In the same way that I talk about like Jaden to people where I'm like, he looks great, but I haven't seen him really practice. It's hard for me to know. This year of any year, when anyone asks me how I think they're going to do, I say I really don't know, and I'm not copping out because everything is so new. There's so many different players. Everything is so different that I don't even know really what to expect from how they're going to play, who's going to play prominent roles outside of obvious people. And maybe they don't know that either. And so I really think it's hard to kind of know. But I will say, I think the roster has been, the way I describe it is I think it's been baselined. A lot of the moves that were made reset this. Um, and most of the deals that they did were not very long in term or money. So they've left themselves room to shake it up even more, maybe more than you'd think after 1 year. And I think it's just kind of hard to know what you're going to get. I do think that they are significantly improved in certain areas. Like obviously, linebacker is a significant improvement from where they were. I think the safety position could be dynamic this year, and I think it's improved, especially with Chin in there from what I've seen, at least early. But I'm with everybody on the questions of, is the offensive line good enough? Well, they never acquired a top tier left tackle, so it's hard to know. And they did change a lot of parts of it, so it's hard to know. Are they significantly improved in their weapons? Maybe. Like, what does Eckler bring? Is he like what he was a couple of years ago, pre some injuries, and becomes a perfect complement to Robinson? Maybe, hopefully. Is their receiving core, a little light on potentially one big target? Yeah, I think that's why we've talked about Brandon Ayuk as a possibility here. Is the tight end room settled? No, like obviously not. Like Sinnett's going to have to step up as a second round pick rookie, probably play a certain amount. And then, defensively, we don't know if they have a number one corner. So I think all the questions are really fair, but some of them could be answered in scheme. Some of them, this team could be a little better than people think. I will say with all of the changes, and it's why I'm stuck on, I really don't know how they're going to play or what they're going to look like. I don't think it's fair to put any real expectations on them at this point. I mean, other than like, they don't want to hear you say that you think they're going to be bad or middling. Like, and I'm always optimistic and hope that things are going to go well. And maybe they are Houston this year, but I don't know that. And I don't think their division roadmap is like Houston's was a year ago.
Exactly.
So I think it's going to be very difficult for them to overtake both Philadelphia and Dallas the way Houston was able to overtake essentially just Jacksonville. So I'm hoping and I'm optimistic, but I don't know what I don't know. And as far as the roster goes, I think it's fair to ask real questions about the holes that are there for sure.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. And I think there's so many unknowns. And again, the impact of the coaching is something that I want to see as well, because I think that's going to be pronounced in the secondary. But is that enough for Emmanuel Forbes and Benjamin St-Juste? I don't know yet, right? I think I agree with you on the safeties. I think the defensive ends will be better than the group they had after the deadline. And I think they're better than what Chase Young was, because Chase was just too inconsistent and didn't do what they always wanted to do. So there may be more of a consistency there for them with that. Is that going to make them dramatically better? I don't know. To me, I always separate when people ask about the franchise, I always separate long-term versus short-term. And short-term, I think there's a lot of questions. I think long-term, I like their approach, and I think it's a winning one. Especially if Jaden Daniels hits, then it's a very much a winning one. But I think long term, I like what they're building. I like the approach. Short term, there's just so many questions that to me remain unanswered. And it's funny because about the offensive line too, and obviously left tackle is a huge issue. That's the one of the biggest questions going into camp is who's going to be that guy, because the importance of the position. But I think you can't forget that a lot of the issues last year were also as much up front with center and that interior. Now, Cosme was very good, but like the left guard was just too inconsistent, and the center position was inconsistent. And then Wiley, we saw what he did. He's got to play better. But I think they've improved in that interior. Is it enough to offset where the questions we still have at tackle?
Right. I mean, Nick Allegretti was not a starter with Kansas City. They're projecting him to be one here, but they're paying him, not like a top tier starter. So this is a good low risk deal, and hopefully he turns out to be the right person for them. Biotish, I believe in, is an answer. I think that's fine. I loved Cosme last year. I thought he was by far their best offensive lineman. And cover your ears for people who don't want to hear this. I'm willing to give Wiley a second chance here
Yeah.
in a different scheme, in a different offense. I think he's a better player than what you saw a year ago. I think that scheme did him no
Right.
favors, and I want to see what happens with him. But left tackle is a humongous open question. We have a right-handed quarterback. So, like I was watching Hard Knocks the other night. They haven't gotten around to the signing of Brian Burns yet. In their division is going to be Dallas, and it's going to be the Giants, who have, I don't know, maybe arguably the best rush tandem in the league now with Burns and Thibodeau.
Mhm.
So, there are, I guess the point about the roster largely too is this. Like if you look around, you could see the weak points that could be taken advantage of. But I use the words could be because I'm with you on the coaching with the defense. The corners might be better than you think they are. I think they're going to find out if they need to
Right.
spend money or spend draft capital on corner this year. That's one of the risks that they're willing to take, is to go in with this group and see what they have. But it could be a weak point. I think we all know that left tackle is going to be something they're going to have to manage throughout the year, figure out how to make it work for them. Do they need a third receiving target? I don't, do they need of that level, like an Ayuk level? I don't know. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Let's see how Jahan develops this year in this offense. And so I think I see all of this. The question marks are right there, and they're hoping they can answer them in a new group in a short time frame. And typically that leads to an up and down season, typically. Yeah. And I'm hoping there'll be more ups and downs this year.
And I think if Jaden Daniels shows growth and looks like the guy that they hope everybody, the fans hope he can become, that's going to be the biggest thing coming out of the season, that, hey, you've got, and I don't know how many times we've gone into a season saying the same thing, like if this guy hits, but this guy's pretty talented and he's pretty smart and his approach is the right one. So if he hits, like you can say, okay, you can build around this player, right? And so I think that's going to be a massive part of this season, is just, is he the guy to go forward and become that top 10 quarterback they haven't had here in forever. So I think that'll be a big deal as well. And, so like, yeah, I mean, that's to me, the number one thing is with the you don't want to always make it about, because like every year, again, it seems like it's about the quarterback. You want to see growth in all areas. You want to, like, if you're a fan, you want to see, okay, hey, maybe they were really right about Brandon Coleman or this player, that player. And by the way, on Brandon Ayuk, I still don't think they're ever going to trade him, and they're certainly not going to trade him this year. And in talking,
that's not happening.
Yeah, I know. And so like that, there's that whole conversation that I had Matt Barrows from The Athletic on here. I've talked to our guy from ESPN, Nick Wagner, many times over the last several months about Ayuk, because, like, obviously that's where Adam Peters from, and never have I ever gotten a sense from them that, like, oh yeah, they may do this. Like, they want to win a Super Bowl. He makes them better. So, and they both think that he'll eventually get signed. But anyways, that's a whole different topic. So, yeah, but I do think so much of this is about Daniels. Is he the guy? And I'm optimistic about what I think he can do there, and I haven't seen anything to not be optimistic yet about him. But, August, September, October, no, that'll determine it. So to me, that's a big thing. So I think it's kind of fair where people look at the roster, because when they're looking at, they're looking at names. I think we're looking at changes in the whole infrastructure too.
Yes. Yeah. And listen, don't forget, they had a lot of high draft picks this year. I mean, this could be not just Jaden Daniels, but like the type of draft class, if they hit on 2, 3, 4 of them of these second and third round picks, that suddenly you have a very different looking, promising roster. Like, is Sanders still going to walk in and be a starting corner? I think that's a hope. Is Sinnott going to emerge, along with Zach Ertz and be the obvious starter, next year? Could McCaffrey be a good number 3, number 4, or even more than that as a receiver? I don't really know. It's a possibility. Is Coleman, is he someone that turns into someone that can be a reliable starter at left tackle? That would be the break of all breaks. Right. If you get a third round pick that turns into a really good starting left tackle. Is Johnny Newton, when he comes up, we haven't seen him yet. Like, does he become a versatile, pass rusher who should never have fallen to where he fell? Like, this could be, and we hope, because of all the draft capital that was there, this could be the draft class led by Jaden Daniels that turns the whole thing around. So it's not just him. I mean, I'm watching this whole rookie class very, very closely here. I want to see if Jeremy Chin is a long-term answer for them. I think that's why they gave him a 1-year deal, because there's a maybe there with him, obviously. And then there are these other positions like corner, and I think Forbes you mentioned, St. Just. I think that, some of these young guys, they have young corners in there too that are going to be battling, and this is going to be a very interesting spot in training camp as corner. Which young players make this team? There might be a surprise. Who ends up starting? We'll see. So that position group is probably the most interesting one to me, the most competitive one to me, and the one where throughout the season we're going to find out, do they have to go spend money on a veteran corner to upgrade it, or did they develop here? And I'll buy into it, considering what they've done with so many corners through the years. I'll buy into it that there's a possibility that the answers are in-house here at that position.
Well, it's funny because you bring up the draft, and I agree with you on the draft class. I mean, obviously, if Daniels hits, the draft class looks great. And if he doesn't, then it looks like it could be a very good one, but you still need that. But I think guys even like Jordan McGee and Dominique Hampton, those kind of guys, I think are going to can definitely factor. I'll be curious to see Hampton in the preseason, because he could be like Jeremy Chin plays pretty well, but if Hampton develops, he might be your guy, because he can fill that kind of a role. And Jordan McGee, I know they're very optimistic about him, but let's see it. But I think he's a guy too that can he develop into being more than just a backup. But even if he is just a good backup, that's okay, because you talk to GMs over the years, and like the rule of thumb is usually 2 to 3 quality starters, and then 2 to 3 guys who are reserves who help contribute to winning, not just play, but contribute to winning. And I think if they get that from this class, they'd be very, very happy.
Yeah. McGee, I'm glad you mentioned him. He's the one of the offseason of the lower round picks that I think it's hit everyone's radar. So he looks the part. He looks bigger than the way he's listed. I was surprised when I saw him in person. He looks bigger. He seems to play bigger. And again, it's very early, and he was 5th round pick, right? I believe he's 5th round pick. It's a little early here, but he's the one that is already, I'm hearing, through my, the people that I talk to, like, watch him this summer. Like we think we found something in him.
Yep. So there you go, Bram. So anyways, you got any plans for more grilling, anything?
So I'm off. We're going to take a little vacation, my pre-camp vacation next week. We're going to go up to the Poconos, sit by a lake, and get off the grid for a few days. Then I got a week of ramping up the training camp, and I can't wait, because I've been officially bored for a while now. So I'm ready for football to come back. I'm ready to go. And all of this, leads into this too, because it is so unknown and because it's so new. I really don't know what to expect, and that's really exciting for me.
I as a reporter, it's very, very interesting. And I will say, I'm enjoying this summer. It's the first probably relaxing summer I've had in 5 years, because nothing is going on other than take your vacation, get ready for camp. And we went to Yellowstone, we went to Glacier National. It was awesome. And now I just get a chance to relax at home a little bit, 1 or 2 more little quick trips, and ready to go. So I agree with you. I think I'm looking forward to this just for the reasons you said. There's so much intrigue. And again, it's not just about, for me, not just about the record this year. I know a lot of fans, you wanted to win. I get it. But I think what they need to show is they can build it long-term. And so I think that's what I want to see is, did they get the right people in here, coaching, players, to build this long-term, and how are they ascending at the end of the year? Will tell a lot. So, and I think they do have that. So, but anyways, Bram, appreciate your time. Get some more relaxation. It'll get going really soon.
All right. I'll see you soon.
That's it for this episode. Thanks to Bram for joining me, and thank you, as always, for tuning in. I'll be back later in the week with another episode talking to my Eagles counterpart in Philly, Tim McManus, as we continue the NFC East preview. If you want to see the other ones, I talked to Jordan Rodon from the Giants. He also talked about Bobby Johnson, the Commanders' new offensive line coach, because he covered him for a couple of years. And then earlier I talked to Todd Archer from Dallas, and he knows Dan Quinn very well, and Joe Witt and Dorrance Armstrong, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Anyways, but I'll be talking to Tim, see where are the Eagles at, because are they vulnerable? We'll find out. Talk to you next time.